Good evening, and thanks for joining us tonight. My name is Chris Shattuck, and I'm a graduate of Georgia State with an honors degree in journalism. During my time at Georgia State, I was involved with the Signal and served as the newspaper's editor-in-chief my senior year, which is 2014. Currently, I'm a PR pro with about 7 years of experience at agencies with a specialty in enterprise technology. And over the last few years, I've had the privilege of serving on the Young Alumni Council. And for those of you who don't know what the Young Alumni Council is, it's an organization within the Alumni Association whose mission is to really reach the under 40 demographic with social service and networking opportunities to really help bridge the gap between graduation and elite alumni status. So before this year, we supported all kinds of Georgia State events. And through the last year, we've pivoted to offer some virtual programming like tonight's event. So for the Best of Blue Masterclass series, our goal is really to share examples of alumni for alumni. And we're really trying to showcase unique professional and personal journeys that kind of give you an idea of what alumni are doing in the city of Atlanta and beyond. Tonight, we're talking about a subject that's really near and dear to my own heart in terms of finding compelling entertainment and culture stories here in Atlanta. And so I want to give you guys just a quick prompt that you can ask questions in the Q&A button on StreamYard, or if you're viewing us via Facebook Live, you can submit comments there as well. So without further ado, I'm excited to introduce tonight's speaker. Jewel Wicker is someone I've known since my time at Georgia State. She's a freelance entertainment and culture reporter. She's had bylines in GQ, Teen Vogue, Hollywood Reporter. She's worked at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and she's also really involved in the Atlanta Press Club here. She's key on the internship committee, and I've known her since she was at the Signal as the arts and living editor. So I'll bring in Jewel here in just a minute. Here she is.
Hi.
Welcome, Jewel. How are you?
I'm good. How you doing, Chris?
Doing great. Anything I should add from that intro?
No, that was a very glowing intro. Thank you. We have known each other since the Signal days.
So I'm really excited to talk to you tonight. You're somebody who, I've watched grow since that time, and you've gotten some really awesome bylines. And I'm really excited to talk tonight about how you've been able to do that and just kind of take your experience at Georgia State and then transform it into a real career. So I want to start kind of with the thesis of tonight's topic, and just to you, what makes for a good, compelling story idea? What's your process for going about and finding sources that you can then take to these national audiences?
I think for me, I write a lot of stories about the South, Southern culture, Black culture, Atlanta culture, and entertainment is usually at the heart of it. But I look for sources that tell us something about these parts of culture that maybe haven't been told before or haven't been told well. Kind of the unsung heroes, the people who haven't gotten the shine they deserve. And then I also look for people who can speak to obviously like trends, right? So is there something going on that we haven't really delved into well that perhaps somebody who is Southern, Black, from Atlanta, all of these things can speak to and talk about maybe the ways in which the city is changing or hasn't been highlighted before. Because I think there's so many different ideas of what Atlanta is. So anytime we can broaden that scope and talk about Atlanta from different perspectives, it's always really nice.
Yeah, let's dig into that subject a little bit. So how do you think Atlanta is perceived at the national level, especially when it comes to the editors that you're pitching and interacting with? What are their expectations for what you're writing about?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting because Atlanta is, in terms of entertainment, when it comes to both music, film and television, and I would say tech, really a key city. Nationally and internationally, but I think sometimes we still get a little forgotten I think people still think of us as a slower city. We're in the South. I don't think people think of us as very diverse because we're in the South. And so I think our identities get flattened a little bit in ways that I'm kind of surprised that editors still think of us these ways sometimes. And sometimes I find myself having to push back on ideas or concepts that are maybe outdated or not quite true about the city. But I also feel really lucky that I've had the opportunity to write about us on a national scale, because it's always good to have a writer from here telling our stories versus somebody who is, flown in for a day or two to write about us, but doesn't necessarily have a full firm grasp on the city itself.
So you have that context that's really important.
Yeah.
You have those sources maybe that you can go to that really can tell the true story versus somebody who's coming in and trying to work from maybe a misconception.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I'm from here. My mom's from here. My grandma's from here. I mean, my family has been in Atlanta for over a century. So, and in Georgia since the 1800s. I mean, so we have been here for a very long time. And I think that helped me when I first went freelance to kind of think of what are some stories that my relatives have had about their experiences in Atlanta that really make up the identity of the culture in Atlanta as they see it. And it just hasn't been told and hasn't really gotten attention. And that really kind of helped me to kind of think of some story ideas when I first went freelance, but also when I worked at the ABC as well.
Yeah. So you've been a writer for a long time now, close to a decade as by my count. What are some stories that you're the most proud of?
Ooh, that's a good question. I did a profile in GQ that was my first profile for GQ with Lil Baby. And I was really proud of that story. It was right after Ray Sharp Brooks was killed that I went and talked to Lil Baby. And I think because I was from here, was able to ask him questions that I don't think a reporter who didn't have an understanding of Atlanta politics, and the ways in which music and politics and entertainment all intertwine here. I don't think a reporter from outside would have necessarily asked some of those questions. So I was really happy with how that book came out. And I feel like I was able to connect with him because he's from Southwest Atlanta. I'm from Southwest Atlanta. I was able to kind of put him at ease and have just a really casual, comfortable conversation with someone who's notoriously not a fan of doing interviews. And so that was really, really fun. I'm trying to think of some other stories that I just the cover story for Atlanta magazine this month with Jalea Harmon, the young Black teen. She's 16 now, who did the Renegade on TikTok and wasn't getting credit for it last year. I profiled her for Teen Vogue. Literally, she was the last in-person interview I did before COVID was declared a pandemic and everything shut down. So to come full circle a full year later and have her be the cover of Atlanta magazine, that really was special to me. I'm always excited to get a byline that has a cover attached to it, but I was more so excited for her because I know how discouraged she was as a teen when she wasn't quite getting credit for her work. And so to see her not only get credit, but get a cover from it was really, really awesome.
That is awesome. And I'll have to check out that next issue of Atlanta magazine.
Yeah.
So you mentioned something that was your last interview before the pandemic, like in-person interview. So how has your job changed over the last year or so? And what is the hardest thing about your job nowadays?
I think it was really difficult at first because I think a lot of the budgets shrunk, they froze, everybody was in panic mode. Publications were just kind of halting and finding stories. I would say once the kind of social justice uprising happened, that changed really quickly. It went from being no budget to all of a sudden they really wanted to hire reporters, specifically Black reporters, because they realized that they had a deficit in their newsrooms. So work has actually been really busy for me, extremely busy for me. I would say for the past, since maybe like last May and June, work has been consistently extremely busy. But I've also gotten into the podcasting space. I did a podcast on the runoffs in December and January. That was something that was new for me. So I've really started to branch out into other multimedia platforms in a way that I hadn't before either. But I think the biggest thing that's changed since before the pandemic is obviously I've done a lot of Zoom interviews. The interviews that have like photo shoots attached to them in our magazine and larger pieces, I've been able to go out and meet with people in person. But it really has been quite interesting to have to form those connections via Zoom. But in some ways, it's also positive because I'm able to talk to people that don't live here in Atlanta and maybe I wouldn't have been able to interview them before.
Yeah. So like, what's your process for reaching out to somebody that maybe, like you mentioned, Little Baby, like somebody who's maybe a little bit famous? Do you go through their agent? Do you reach out to them directly to social media? Like, how do you speak to so many different folks, especially through the pandemic? Has it become harder to get those interviews?
I don't know if it's become harder. For the Little Baby one, I would say GQ facilitated that connection. But I am really fortunate in that because I've been on the Atlanta scene for a while, I know a lot of the managers and a lot of the publicists. And so it's easier for me to say, hey, I want to do this. I have those connections and they trust me. They understand I'm a credible reporter. They know I'm going to be fair and honest. If something is, not great, I'm going to say that, but I'm also going to say if something is great. They trust my credibility as a reporter. And I think that reputation has made it easier for me to reach out and talk to artists, even artists that don't love doing interviews. So for instance, 21 Savage notoriously does not like doing interviews. And I covered him before he was detained, and then even after as well. And because I had that relationship with his management, they were able to supplement information for me that I wasn't getting from him because he doesn't do well with interviews. And that relationship was really beneficial to me even after when I was doing some of that reporting on what was going on with him being detained by ICE.
Yeah, so that's one story I know reached a lot of ears. I remember hearing about it on NPR and then seeing your story. So talk to me about some of your stories that have maybe gone viral or maybe were shared in a way that you didn't expect. What was that like?
It was really interesting to be on NPR talking about 21 Savage. I know my grandparents were like, we don't know who that was, but we learned a lot. So that was a lot of fun. I'm trying to think stories that have gone. I don't really think I thought the podcast that we put out was going to be as big as it was. We've been nominated for a few awards. It was
congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. It was really well received. And I think we were just kind of so deep into the weeds of getting it done that we weren't really, we wanted it to be good and we wanted it to resonate with people, but we were just doing the work. We weren't really thinking about anything else. And so that's been really shocking and surprising to me. And then I think when I write stories, I talked a little bit about using my family as inspiration. And sometimes when I write stories about older, like maybe venues or things that no longer exist here in Atlanta, but played an instrumental role in the city's like identity, people are really excited about those stories in a way that I sometimes think, like locals will love it. But I get people who don't live here who said, I came here for spring break or for Freaknik, or I came here to party and go to the clubs and I went to that club and oh my God, it was so great. And these people who don't even necessarily live in Atlanta, but have a really strong tie to some of these stories. I'm always really pleasantly surprised by that.
Do you feel like you have to explain Atlanta's entertainment and culture industries when you're pitching stories? What's that like?
Yeah, I do. Or I feel like I have to dispel myths about Atlanta, I think. And sometimes it's really frustrating because I'm quite often talking to editors who are in New York or in LA, but they don't have a firm grasp on Atlanta. Some of them have never been here. And so it can be frustrating when I'm like, I know you think you know what this city is like. That is not accurate. And if you publish this, we're going to get pushback from locals because we're not painting a fair and accurate portrait of the city. I don't want that for my reputation. You don't want it for your publication. Please listen to me here. So that can be kind of frustrating. But, more often than not, I have editors who are who trust me and allow me and my sources to be the expert in Atlanta.
Not to put you on the spot here, but I'm kind of just curious. Do you have any stories that you were surprised maybe they were turned down, or do you have some stories that you've just been trying to find the right publication to tell that story? What's that like, pitching something that you have to maybe put in some extra work into?
Yeah, I mean, I was pitching it. There's a rapper named Saweetie that I was pitching about. I was trying to do a profile on her last year. And no one wanted this profile, and now everyone, because she's been such, she's so good at social media and she's so well liked that everybody wants to do features on her now. And I'm like, I did this last year. And so that's really always interesting. But sometimes timing is timing. You can't be mad at it. But I will say, and I can't talk too much about it, but there's a podcast that I've been working on that I'm hoping to start production on pretty soon. I've been pitching that podcast for 2 years. And I just got to a point where I'm getting good interest from companies and feedback. And we are hopefully pretty close to getting into production with it. After 2 years, it took a really long time for me to get traction on it. And it wasn't because I felt like it was a great story, but I wasn't necessarily getting the traction that I felt like we should be getting.
Gotcha. So I think your perspective here is really interesting because you've worked as both a staff writer and as a freelancer. Mm-hmm. Do you ever feel that pull to want to go back on staff, or do you appreciate the flexibility of freelancing too much?
I don't. I love the flexibility of freelancing. It allows me to wear many different hats. It allows me to diversify not only my income, but the ways in which I tell stories and the types of stories that I tell. I feel like I went from having one editor to 16 editors, or however many publications I'm working with. And they all want things different. And so I'm growing constantly because I'm constantly working with different people who have different styles and voices. But I understand that is an immense privilege. Everybody cannot be freelance. It takes a lot, and you have to obviously get money in order for it to work. So I understand the benefits of being a staff writer. It just, for me, and also in terms of my mental health and my emotional health and my physical health, it's just been better for me to be freelance and have a more flexible schedule.
Well, let me ask you a question from the audience here then. What motivates you to keep going when your stories or ideas get turned down?
That is a good question. I mean, you develop a thick skin and you get used to it, right? Like, you don't take things personally as much as you maybe would have before, because it's a part of the job. I will say I know when there's a story that I'm really passionate, like the podcast I was telling you about. For 2 years, I was getting people, and it wasn't that I was ever talking to people and people were like, we don't like this idea. People were like, great idea. We're not going to put any funding behind it, but excellent idea, right? And there were times where I'm like, am I crazy? Should I just give up on this? Is it not? But I felt really passionate about it. I felt like I could tell this story, and I felt like it was a story that should be told, and that kind of kept me going. Now, were there a few months where I put it on the back burner and I didn't deal with it? Yeah, absolutely. But I came back to it because I felt really passionate about it. And I thought, if I can get with the right home for this, we can do something really good here. And so I think that's kind of what kept me going. But there's some stories where I pitch it and it doesn't get any traction. And I'm like, we'll leave that there. That's okay.
Yeah, so maybe if something doesn't get picked up right away, you'll just kind of add that to the list and find the right place. And sometimes you might have an idea that sticks with you for a while.
It takes time. Sometimes it really does take time for something to get picked up. And like I said, timing is everything. So maybe right now isn't the best time. I'll circle back to it. If I don't think it's worth circling back to, I won't. But sometimes it really is something that if you circle back to it, you'll get more traction.
So I have a question to kind of flip the tables on you a little bit. I mean, I spend a fair amount of time pitching stories that I think are interesting to journalists like yourself. What's something that you wish a PR pro knew about you before they pitched you?
I mean, it's usually pretty basic stuff, like know my beat, know what I tend to write about, know who I tend to write for, know that I don't live in LA, right? So I can't come to your even I don't live there. Really basic things, right? I try to be responsive. I get a lot of emails, and so if you email me to come to an event in LA, I'm not responding because I don't feel like I have to respond to that. I don't live there. But for the most part, if you pitch me something that's relevant to me, I just can't take it on, or I'm not interested for whatever reason, I don't have the bandwidth, I'll try to respond and say so.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
So, since the purpose of this class is to really, give some tips to some folks who are just kind of graduating school, maybe starting their freelance careers, what tips do you have for folks that are right out of college trying to build up their flipbook?
I think even if you don't have a staff job yet, and even if you're, say, working in another field until you get that job that you want in journalism, you can be freelancing. You can be pitching local publications. I know creative writing isn't really an option anymore for Atlanta Magazine and the AJC, Arts ATL, right? I believe it's Immerse ATL. There are a lot of publications here. Or like Canopy ATL is a new nonprofit. Atlanta Civic Circle is another nonprofit. These are all places that you can be pitching stories to that are very localized, that you might be an expert in telling. And I think that that's a good way to get some clips as you are waiting, as you are applying for maybe staff roles or trying to get some bigger freelance jobs.
Gotcha. Well, I think we've gone through most of the questions that I had for you tonight. What would you add? Anything? Any other tips for writers? Or
I'm trying to think. Yeah, my biggest thing is just pitch and don't feel like because you don't work on staff or because like if there's a story that you feel that you can tell, if you feel like you have the sourcing, pitch it. And you'd be really surprised. All it takes is one yes. I remember when I went freelance, I didn't have any national publications, and I took a pitching class, and I cold pitched Billboard, and they said yes. And I remember I had pitched like some other national publications, and they hadn't been responsive, or they had said no. Literally, the minute you get a national publication, all of a sudden it's 10 times easier to get more national publications, right? So you just have to keep banging on that door. And eventually you get a yes, and that'll make the future yeses just a little bit easier. It'll tell you what you need to change about your pitching process or what you could be doing a little better. You can learn from it. And so I think that's my biggest thing is just don't give up and just keep pitching and don't get discouraged. Sometimes it just takes time.
Gotcha. Well, Jewel, thank you so much for joining us tonight. For everyone who's tuning in via the internet, let's stay connected with Jewel. Her Twitter handle is on display right now. It's Jewel Wicker Show. Follow her for honestly one of the best views of entertainment and culture here in Atlanta. And keep. I think we're wrapping up some of our Best of the Blue series here with the Georgia State Alumni Association, but be sure to give them a follow, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
Thank you, Chris.